Good evening, everybody out there in Facebook land. My name is Paul Sterling, and tonight we are going to be talking about men and masculinity year 2020. What does it mean to be a man? And what does the evolution of mankind have to do with it? And what do our relationships look like moving forward? So we're going to be asking different people different opinions. And if you've got opinions, we definitely want to hear from you in the comment list. So I'll introduce myself, and then I'll have Adrian and Skylar introduce themselves. I am an author of this book. It's a bestseller on relationship communication, Argue Less, Love More. And what I say about that is that not even my own quote, but I was once told that every master started out as a disaster. So I can find the disaster part of my relationship and trying to figure out what it meant to be a man, because I looked at the masculinity that my dad represented and my older brother represented, and I wanted nothing to do with that, or at least a lot of that. And so it was a real challenge. These calls happen at 6 o'clock in the evening, 9 o'clock in the morning. Scott Thomas from Love Coach Academy, Debbie G from Spirits Valley Gone Wild, and me from Argue Less, Love More all got together. It was really Scott's brainchild, and we said, we want to do something. We want to give people tips, tools, techniques to create more compassion, connection, and deal with these challenges and changes and chaos that's going on right now. So that whatever the other side of this thing, when we get out of it, we're more connected than when we started. So I will put a banner up there, and you can find more information about the other calls. But that's me. My background is trained with Tony Robbins. And that was a turning point for me. I went from being a commercial fisherman in Alaska to being very curious about personal growth. So I will talk more about me in a little bit, but Adrian, what about you? How did you get on this path, and how did you get to represent all of mankind and men and masculinity for the year 2020?
Well, that's quite a question, Paul. Hi, everybody. When you mentioned your turning point, it made me think of a turning point for me, which feels worth saying is very significant, and I think is an answer to your question. When I was 21 years old, I sat a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat, sitting in silence for 10 hours a day, where I was asked to cultivate the ability to feel my sensations and not react to them. And my first experience on day 6, where I was experiencing a sensation that was otherwise bringing me massive amounts of pain, where the same sensation was there, but there wasn't the pain, there wasn't the reaction. And that changed my life. I actually realized, like, oh my gosh, we have the capacity as human beings to experience anything objectively. Nothing is inherently painful. It's our relationship to our experience that brings the pain. Now, obviously, cultivating that skill for everything is a lifetime's work. But yeah, I mean, and that work that I've been developing, that capacity to be with my experience, my physical self, my emotional self, and cultivate equanimity, cultivate objective, empathetic, observer relationship to my life actually brought me to Scott. The big reason I'm here right now is Scott Thomas, as you mentioned, in Love Coach Academy. I've been working with Scott for a number of years now, and he kind of brought this other, like, almost missing piece to my relationship of really being with myself, cultivating the ability to be equanimous and then inherently loving because of the equanimity. And as we decondition our reactive minds, love is a natural byproduct. But Scott brought this gem of nothing is inherently there's nothing inherently right or wrong. There might be right or wrong for me, but no one is inherently right or wrong in what they're doing. Now, that's a profound thing. And I imagine you'll talk a little bit more about that. I imagine, Paul. because people might go like, what do you mean nothing's inherently wrong? But particularly in relationship, moving beyond the right and wrong paradigm just changed my life. Yeah, and then I went on a journey with Scott, and he started doing this thing, like you said, with you and Scott and Debbie, and here I am. So those are some words.
So let me ask you a question. There's an expression that says we don't know who discovered water, but we're pretty sure it wasn't fish. Because fish are immersed in water 24/7, at least most of them, so they almost don't even know that it exists. It's like human beings for probably thousands and thousands of years didn't know that there was this thing called air. And until we polluted it enough that it became visible, you know? And so what I want to do is, for both of you, but start with you, Adrian, and bounce to Skylar, what does it mean? What is masculinity mean? What does it mean to be a man? Is there like this label because we have different sex organs or a different way of thinking? What does it mean to be a man versus the masculine versus the feminine, man versus woman?
Yeah. You know, that's an interesting question. You know, like I could speak to like the masculine energy, my understanding of like what masculine energy means, you know, directive as opposed to receptive, that action taker. And that's certainly been a significant part of the manifestation of my masculinity, and whether it's because I'm an Aries or the other influences that have created who I am. Certainly being a man being in this male-bodied person has taken that shape of being particularly directive, being firm. I think, you know, for me, and I think this crosses the bounds of the big thing that allows me to feel solid in my being, which is like inherently masculine on some level. Of course, I have a strong feminine self. I'm a Pisces moon. I'm very emotional, very intuitive. Of course, like we all do. I have a lot of femininity in me. I guess what's coming up for me is what it means to be a man is to be truthful, do what I say I'm going to do, and always do my best, which I fail at all the time. Like, you know, and obviously doing your best can look many different ways. Sometimes doing your best, really doing your best, is watching Netflix. That's like really is going to nurture you. But yeah, I think for me, being a man is really kind of showing up in those things: truth, integrity, accountability. That's what being a man is feeling like for me right now.
All right, and I'm challenging us all. And what you described, I would also say that I would want that with my feminine partner to, you know, truth and integrity and showing up who she is. And she can be very directive and she can be very feminine. So it's like, I'm still trying to figure out, like, and questioning myself at the same time, Adrian. So I'm going to bounce to Skylar to just get him introduced. But like, going back and forth, I don't have a right answer here. I'm wrestling with a question that I think, you know, like this whole thing right now that's happening with Black Lives Matter. It's like the same thing I said to start with. We don't know who discovered water, but we're pretty sure it wasn't fish. Well, there's been a lot of discrimination and inequity and a lot of other challenges that have been sort of invisible, except for like to a lot of people who are Black. They're like living in it, going like, how come you can't see it? Well, because it wasn't until I actually, many years ago, I was the only white guy in an all Black bar. And it was like, I went, wow, this is really interesting. You know, and there was no threat. Nobody was like, but I felt inherently uncomfortable in myself there. I felt scared and intimidated. And it's like, so I'm bringing it up and trying to look at, right now, we're looking at all these paradigm shifts on the planet. What is masculinity? What's femininity mean? What does it mean to be Black? What does it mean to be white? What does it mean, like my ex-daughter-in-law is half black and half white. And she at times said, well, I feel like I don't fit in anywhere.
Well, if I can speak to that a little bit, Paul, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think what a lot of us, what most of, if not all of us, men need to grapple with, similarly to what us white-skinned people need to grapple with, is that we are seeing the world through the lens of male being better. Whether we really consciously know it or believe it, there is this toxic masculinity that exists in the world. And I think that a big part of being a healthy male today is to recognize that as much as we can, bring it to the surface and unwind it, and recognize that certainly there are differences, receptive, directive, and all the other qualities that kind of define the difference between masculine and feminine. But one thing we really need to own as much as possible is the reality of equality and not better than. And that's just like unwinding whatever unconscious bias we might have around our relationship.
Wait, Adrian, slow down. Go back.
Yeah.
You said something, it was like in the middle of that, and it's like, and that is the inherent question, like, that I grew up with but didn't really know it. And I grew up in like my mom, I grew up in a liberal family. We marched on Washington. My parents were at Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. But I also remember growing up hearing a lot of the things like, don't be like a girl, don't be a sissy,
Right.
don't be, you know, like that is bad and we are better, or we are tougher, we're, you know, we don't behave in those ways. And I definitely want to bounce Skylar in, but I'm really, it's been interesting. I've been watching the Netflix, I think it's Netflix or Hulu, I don't know which one it is, but there's a series on Hillary Clinton, and I really didn't realize how much she had been through, being one of the first women and first Secretary of State, first, going for presidential, like the bias and the, the objectification and all of the rest of that that's going on between men and women. And I've got to kind of, like, the wake up call is where we look and go, where is my part in this?
Beautiful.
And
yeah, that's brutal.
My part, I'll give you one example that, and I've talked to my partner about it. I was in Hawaii. I was sitting next to a bar. I was having dinner by myself, and I was working on my notes for a relationship workshop. There was a guy at the bar talking about women as a conquest, and just like a lot of derogatory language, that if he had been talking about other nationalities like that, I just would have stepped in it and not tolerated it. And I went, wow, where did it become okay? And it bothered me, but where did I stop and not intervene and go, you know what, this is not okay. This is not okay to talk about women like this or other people like this. So that was where I didn't make a stand. And the reason I bring it up is because what allows for a lot of stuff to happen on this planet right now is when we don't make a stand. So
the silence.
Skylar, how did you get on this journey? And how old are you? You're representing our millennials, I believe.
I think so. I'm 35, and I have quarantine hair. I am actually really excited to get a haircut. I moved to Washington State here in about a week, so that's kind of how I got on this journey. I grew up in the suburbs / country-ish area, and I moved to my first major city and lived there in a giant polyamorous blues dancing hippie commune with around up with a whole bunch of different people. And there I got to see a lot of different versions of relationships that, like, I didn't even know what those words meant when I moved in. So I just knew that it seemed like a lot of fun because I'd never lived with a bunch of people before. And so it gave me a very interesting perspective, one that I'll get into in a moment. But I was a hardcore long-term serial monogamous my entire life, still am, where I've had about 4 relationships each, spanning many years. And I grew up in a very I grew up in a very relationship centric family, where my mother and my father, they got married after just knowing each other for a few months. My mother is 7 years older than my father, and so she always managed like the money, and he was like the hardcore creative guy. And we had our own business. And so through the course of my entire life, for 33 years, my brother and I and my family, we all worked together, and I was very much trained that, it required everyone working as a team, that there was an equality, there was equity within the family itself. And that was something that I've grown up and talked to a lot more people, finding out that it's not only rare, but almost unbelievably impossible to even imagine, from most of the people I talk to. So it gave me kind of a unique perspective. I also grew up in a kind of hands across America sort of world, where I myself had friends of like every color and creed and identity and everything, and so did everyone else. And it wasn't until I moved to Seattle, major city, and lived there did I ever hear like real hardcore like toxic masculinity or toxic femininity, or any kind of sexism or anything. I hadn't really ever heard anything like that. To me, that kind of stuff was like stuff you saw on the news. It wasn't anything. It wasn't really real. But then you move to a major city, and boy, howdy, you'll hear everything. It's many times the population. People are stacked on top of each other. The stress level is totally different. And so that taught me a whole lot. And it came down that it was the way I saw relationships was a very I always had this interest in equality in relationships, that my own folks taught me that. They both offered very different things, right? My mom took care of the money. My dad was the creative inventor of different kinds of cabinets and stuff like that. And my mom would also help with like edge banding and stuff like that. But my dad, was like crazy jacked, and he would carry around like 200-pound boards of plywood and stuff like that. And so I saw them offering different things, but in equality. And that gave me a very like unique, like these are different puzzle pieces, but they fit together, and they fit together in many ways. And I always thought that was absolutely beautiful. Still think so, 40 something years later. And so I've conducted my relationships that way. And moving to San Francisco and having this little journey over the last few years has brought to me more challenges than I ever would have imagined a city ever bringing me. And I have learned more here in the last 2 years of my life than I have probably learned in all of the other years. As well as learning to see the world in a way, like especially with all the marching and all the protests and stuff like that. I don't like, with how innocent my mind would have been, it would have not been very good at understanding like the bigger picture of the world until just recently. And that's kind of also come that way when it's come to relationships. So that's sort of what's brought me here, is an adventurous instinct to try and challenge myself.
Well, let me ask you, what does it mean to be a man? Because we have these labels, and how much of the label is because we have a certain anatomy, and how much of the label is our personality, and how much is it, like nurture versus nature?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm not too old, but even in just since I was 18 to 35, the women I've dated, what was expected of me as a man has changed like the conversation around that has changed quite a lot in the last 20 years. Yeah, I saw you guys nods like, yeah, that's something that's really changed, and since like the 90s. And so it's in the past, it was a lot more about, hey, you're the guy, so you are the caretaker, you are the financial provider, you are the person who has a lot of power and money, and you need to use it to protect me. And in return, I will be the emotional support. I will be the, if we ever have kids, obviously bring that into play. And I will be a less dominating person. I will be less like physically dominating, but I will be much more emotionally supportive. So much more flying under the radar. And so for a man, the idea was to, if I have this power, if I have a bunch of money, or if I have you know, a lot of physical strength and stuff like that, you know, to use it responsibly, to use it in a way that allows me to support other people, but also to be vulnerable enough to allow my partner to support me back, because I could definitely assert that power and be like, no, I will support this. Really, I am the relationship, you know. That is like power run amok. It's like, oh, I'm not going to just be supportive. I'm going to just support the heck out of you. You're not even going to have an option to experience this. You're not even going to feel like you're a part of it. And so and that's a really unique balance, to use that power to support with power, but also be vulnerable enough on the back end in the emotions to be able to allow that that energy to be received. Otherwise, you know, you can see like I've seen in other relationships with different people, people go, you know, wayward off the scope of the relationship to somebody else because they just didn't feel like they were a part of it. So I think that vulnerability and that support is really useful.
So let me bounce back to Adrian. What are your thoughts about what men bring to a relationship and what men want? What do you want from a relationship? What do you want to bring to a relationship? And the other question, you can choose which one you want to answer here. But as I was thinking about it, what are the feelings that the feminine, it's safe for the feminine to feel, and what are the feelings that it's safe for the masculine to feel? Like, I'll just a quick example. Growing up in my family with my Irish, alcoholic, recovering Catholic dad, the feelings that were safe for him to feel were anger and judgment. And in my house, for me, the feelings that I tended to feel but weren't safe were vulnerability, sadness. I was scared of my older brother's violence. I was scared of my dad. But those were not safe feelings. You know, so what are the feelings that are safe and what aren't they? And what do you want to bring as a man? And what do you want the woman to bring? And is that even a conversation anymore?
I think it's a great conversation, and it's a really interesting conversation because we live in such a bizarre new world where, you know, the roles that we've been living or needed to live for generations and generations don't exist in the same way. So things have shifted, and I think it's a great conversation to have. I mean, I think you just answered the question for yourself. I mean, classically in our culture, this new Western culture, as I experience it, the emotions that are safest to express are anger. Yeah, the anger, judgment. In my personal experience, any emotion is welcome. Like, my partner is so just, anytime I move out of my kind of classic stoic self, she just like loves it. Like, the more emotional I can be, the more vulnerable I can be. Sadness, you know, the classic vulnerable emotions for men, because we have been taught from a really early age to be vulnerable, to have the vulnerable emotions, sadness, even jealousy. The softer emotions are a sign of weakness. You know, and I think that it's such a great conversation for us to have because, you know, especially as the whole notion of the what's the word I'm looking for? The binary, the man and woman is starting to dissolve around us. That gender is fluid, like literally, physically, and, you know, emotionally in terms of our identity. There are many people that have both genitalia. There's many people out there that have physical male body but identify as being female. You know, like, when we all have, of course, strong feminine sides. Those of us that are masculine, well, we have feminine sides. And I think as we let go of this idea that expressing ourselves in female ways is a sign of weakness or shameful, the more we'll see just how much we have feminine and masculine tendencies, whether we are male-bodied, female-bodied, or both bodied. I think the conversation that needs to be had is that we need to accept whatever is really true in our natural, organic tendency. And it might be that you're male bodied, but you really tend to be more receptive, softer, quieter, other classically female tendencies. And you asked me another question, like, what is it that I want from my female partner? I am a male-bodied and identify as male. I'm very masculine, and that works for me. I didn't think much about it until more recently, as I have more gender fluid friends, and as I've gone deeper into, what does it mean to be a human being? And I think maybe that's kind of an important question to be had, or reframe. And I think we're doing that on some level through the work that you're doing, Scott, and Love Coach Academy. What does it mean to be a good human being? Someone who knows themselves well, can ask for what it is they need and want, who doesn't shame other people, harm other people, and maybe we're moving beyond what it's like, it being really important of how to be a really good man, and into what does it mean to be a really good human, as we accept the way that all human beings manifest in their true organic nature.
Yeah, and very different. And you've struck on a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to bounce to Skylar in a second, but it's like, if you thought about it in say the 50s, Leave It to Beaver, and that whole era was sort of like, there was you knew what it took to be a good wife or a good husband. You knew how to do the laundry, you knew how to have kids, you knew how to cook dinner, or you went and you gave up your soul to a job that you might have hated, but spent 30 or 40 years doing it. In the end, you got to watch. So we're sort of in that transition point where we know that we don't want what they had, but we're not exactly sure what we want and where we're going. There's
totally.
Nautically, and I spent 18 years as a commercial fisherman, it's called the transition point, where what you had in the past is disappeared on the horizon behind you, and where you're headed hasn't showed up on the new horizon. And it's a very confusing and ambiguous time. And I look at myself, Thanks. One of the emotions that triggers me the most is ambiguity.
What kind insecurity, the anxiety of not knowing. Totally.
So, Skylar, and by the way, we had gentlemen, thank you for the thoughtful, transparent conversation. I am a family communication and relationship coach. Some of my work is with dads. You are right on point with the male identity, and I'm excited to hear what can be. So we're tapping into pioneers, and at some levels, Adrian, from your work all the way back when you did the 10 days of silence, I listen to that and my brain goes crazy. But that is the journey inward. That's the new frontier. Forget Star Trek. This is the internal track. The journey, the most courageous thing we can do is look inside and be with our feelings and be with our thoughts and make friends with, I call it right behind me, your relationship operating systems. Look at your habits, patterns, and beliefs. Do they support you or sabotage you?
Yeah. Know thyself. Yeah. All the great masters around over all the airs. Know thyself. Is like Scott likes to say, learn how to love yourself. A little different, but sorry to interrupt there. But yes, know thyself.
I've been interrupting too.
Yes.
The thing that I think is really critical, it's wonderful, like for you, Adrian, to be in a relationship where your feelings are accepted. And the scary journey is, courage is, you don't know whether they're going to be accepted. And you do it anyway. That you make the commitment to be authentic more important than the commitment to be accepted. So to accept myself. And I guess I'm going to bounce to you, Skylar, with a different question, because I look at it and I look at my relationship with men. Do I trust men? And A lot of ways I don't. My older brother, he was somewhat of a bastard. I admired him. I idealized him because he had friends and was charismatic and he had a line of girlfriends. And I had a girlfriend that I loved and he slept with her. And,
Wow.
and then I won't even go into the rest of it, but it was brutal.
Wow. Some other time I want to hear that story.
Yeah. And it was, so it's like I realized in a lot of ways it wasn't safe for me to be me around men. And it's like, how do you look at men? Do you look at them as a competition? And I'm envious. I'm envious a lot of times of women that are going to get in circle and they're going to, they're going to do whatever they do and share their heart. And, my partner has several women's circles that she belongs to and goes to. And, kind of like, yeah, I've done that with men, but I kind of almost always wish I was rather with women because there's some place where I trust women more than I trust men. So, Skylar, I'm going to bounce to you for anything that you want to comment on anything that was said there.
Yeah, kind of going a little further back. One of my favorite quotes is mastery is learning how to live gracefully with uncertainty. And boy, howdy, there's a whole lot of uncertainty these days. Like, how are you supposed to act? What are people looking for? And going in is the absolute ultimate journey. That is the tide that raises all ships, all aspects of the self. The healing of the self is the healing. I'm on a spiritual journey right now, have been for quite a while. And so when I look at other people.
Oh.
Okay, I'm still here.
I'm still here.
All right. And Skylar must have gone on an internal journey there.
He must have. I really wanted to hear that. Hopefully he's not going on and on. He can catch himself.
So we'll catch up with Skylar in a second, however he rejoins us.
I could speak to a couple of things you said that struck a chord for me. Yeah, the trusting women. You said something that you were kind of mourning, and I was mourning it too. Like in our culture, women are given permission to be intimate with each other. They can hold hands walking down the street, and that's cool. But if men hold hands walking down the street in our culture, it's not okay. And women have been given this a greener light to be vulnerable, to be intimate with their friends, and men haven't, and that's been a huge deficit for us. And I've thought that too. I was saying thoughts. There's so much more acceptance in our culture for women to get together in that intimate space, and it's happening more now for sure. If you look like in the 50s compared to now, there are groups, Mankind Project being one, and within the circle of people that I imagine that you also circle in there, we are breaking the spell. We are really seeing and believing that vulnerability is strength. Like, oh my goodness, you're able to know yourself and express yourself. That's a real sign of strength. But those conditionings go deep. And so, yeah, like and women, I think, have, because of some of the things I said, have more of a capacity for empathy, for acceptance. And so I think that there is, like, I too, like, as you're talking, was going, yeah, like if I'm in a group of women and I'm vulnerable, I'm more likely to believe that they are really holding my vulnerability with neutrality or even, love and empathy. Whereas if I'm being intimate with men, there's going to be more of a question, like, are they really holding me? Are they holding me and support, or is that judgment that comes from the toxicity of toxic masculinity? So yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, that actually triggered something in me, like, because I noticed that when the conversation of boundaries comes up, it always triggers me. And I had to go back to, why is it that boundaries trigger me? And it's like, oh, I know. Growing up, if I tried to set up a boundary around something with my brother, it was like pointing to something saying, this is really valuable to me. So if you want to screw with my head, screw here. So it was better for me to pretend things weren't valuable and not set up boundaries, because the boundaries that I tried to set up just let him know where my weak spots were.
Ouch, Paul. Oh my God. And that you dealt with
So,
that through your whole growing up life with your brother.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it like
Damn.
there was a healing. There was a healing at one point, but and then he ended up at, I think you may have even heard me say this, but at 26, he killed himself.
No, I didn't know. Yeah.
At 25, he came up to Alaska, and I was a commercial fisherman at that time, and was basically practicing being a badass dude. You know, like building the manly man, one of the most dangerous things you can do outside of active military duty. So I wanted to prove something to myself, probably prove something to the world, like lean into my fear. And he came up and we fished together, and he got to see me in a different way. I was no longer the irritating little brother, but I was the captain of the boat. And so it's like learning how to dance with our relationship with masculinity and femininity. And then we're going to bounce to you, Skylar, in a second. But I want to ask, because people are now locked up with each other. Locked up seems an odd thing to say, but our social distancing. We are spending more time in close proximity with the people that we love or don't like. And what do we want and expect from the feminine? What do we want and expect from ourselves? So maybe we'll bounce to you, Skylar, and you can finish whatever you were saying before you froze up and vanished, or you can just continue on with what we just were talking about.
I think that's hilarious that I said living gracefully with uncertainty, and then not only did our internet get cut out, our whole entire power. So we've been experiencing some rolling blackouts here. Fun stuff. So right now I'm operating on the internet off of my phone, which I'm happy to have. And yeah, so gracefully with uncertainty. The only thing I was going to add was basically, before I get to what you just mentioned, there was a big transformation when I was around my early 20s, maybe I've been somewhere around 19, where I was told to see, instead of looking at people as myself and someone else, that separation, to look at it as the self and the other self. So to look at everyone as other self instead of someone else. Because I used to say this a long time ago, and I still say it, that we're a lot more in common than we believe that we are. And if we only knew that, then because we all have so many basic needs, we have so many basic, like men, women, you know, everybody, like you have so many basic needs that like anyone would be happy to have. So being trapped, you know, for better or for worse, I've realized over the course of my life, men typically don't like me. Most of my friends are women, and I've ended in I in an early age. My dad's like, hey, you know, the best way to you know, if you're ever looking to get a girlfriend, just don't try. Don't try to force anything. Don't, you know, if you're trying to get laid, don't try to get laid. Don't ask about it. Like, don't go for any of this stuff. I've gone on many dates with women where I will get a call on the third date right after, like, I drop her off or she drops me off, or we just get done with the date, and she'll call, and I've had this call many times. So what do you want? Do you want more? Do you want to like have sex? What do you want? And I'm just like, well, I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun. And they're like, I don't know. It's freaking me out. I need guardrails. And so, but to not try to push for, I learned at a young age to not try to push for something like that makes you very attractive, because then you're giving a lot of people the power of their own decision making. And I find that is an equal way to come together in the middle. So I you know, I kind of bounce it around here to a few things, but as far as like being, you know, let's say locked up, you know, because we're doing the whole lockdown thing right now, to not let other people make me their enemy. That's been one of the most powerful things. either side of the gender line. Like I've definitely have had, over the course of years, people try to make me their enemy. I've had people who hated me because I was a man. I had people who hated me because I was white. I had no idea about this until years later, when friends of those friends were like, "You have no idea what they were saying behind your back. It was crazy." I'm like, "I've never lived in a big city with 50 people at once, though." But I'd never experienced that. And so when I didn't live up to the stereotypes of what they must have run into a lot more until I showed up, country bumpkin dude who had a very different worldview perhaps than a lot of the people that they've probably absolutely did run into. And so a lot of time what I will do is I will try and not take any kind of power. And even that is seen sometimes by the masculine. Other men is like, there's no way someone is altruistically nice. There's no way. You are playing at some game. You're going to steal something. So I've noticed that, like, it's kind of an almost, there's like a lose-lose aspect to it, where it's like, if you're trying to take power, it's like people feel like, okay, I know what you want. Like, I understand you. I know what you want. I know what you're trying to go get, because you're overt about it. You're not trying to be sneaky or anything. But then if you're not trying to do that, then people are like, so I don't trust you, because there's no way that you're just this nice guy that's trying to. And so the balance there is for myself to just basically, instead of let my actions speak before my words, to basically let people know what it is that I want before I take action on it. So that is that equality of like.
Oh, we lost Skylar again. I just think, Adrian, your headset is awesome, and I can hear almost every breath. So when you're not speaking, just wanted you to know, but you can use it. You can use it. It's great, and I can't hear you now.
That's because it just died. That's hilarious. Good to know. Every breath. Well, I'm trying
yeah, like every rustle in the room, I could hear. Like I'm almost going, I want a set like that, and it's
the sound quality is amazing.
So what do we do with the discomfort right now? Because for a lot of men, if you look at it, I have during this whole COVID thing, I've enjoyed watching TV somewhat and watching different shows, and I watch anywhere from. There's a great one called The Bold, and it's about this women's magazine and all these issues that are coming up about gay rights and lesbian rights and equality. And it's a really interesting thing. And then occasionally I watch an action movie where it's not about any of that. It's about the bad guys. The bad guys are clearly bad, and the good guys are clearly good. And the whole idea is that the good guys get to beat up the bad guys. And that is still quite dominant in our culture of what's in Hollywood, what's in the movies, of like these clear delineated good guy, bad guy. And the idea is how do we change that delineation of what do we do with our pain and our upset? And how do we protect ourselves without wanting to go punch somebody and do the old paradigm?
Interesting. Well, before you got into the movie thing, you asked the question, which tied into the movie, is what do we do with our discomfort?
Yeah.
And I think it kind of goes back to some of the theme of the show is the more we know ourselves and know what it is we want, we can ask. We're uncomfortable because something is happening that we don't like. So, I think certainly step number one is getting clear on what it is that's happening in the world that's not working for us. Getting clear on what nourishes us, and like you're talking about Netflix, I think that can be a wonderful thing to deal with discomfort sometimes, it could be unhealthy theoretically, but I think the really important thing is to use our words and be clear about what it is we need and ask for it. And not be blaming people when they're not doing what it is we want. especially if we've never asked for what we want in the first place, and then I think having the healthy self-care, like I just got into golf again, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say it. I know it's a gross, privileged, classically white man, blah, 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 with the couple of course, but that nourishes me a lot. I love games, and it allows me to get out and be physical, and been exercising a lot lately. It really helps me, that self-care. Yeah, I mean, that works for me, and I think it's going to be different for everyone. But what do we do? Like the old paradigm of like, I'm upset and I'm going to, going to lash out by, you're wrong and you're so wrong. I'm going to punish you because of it. Like, holy cow! Like, talk about crazy old paradigm. And
Well,
I feel bad saying that because, sometimes we get so reactive. The reptilian brain is so strong that impulse to fight is there. And I'm sure it even comes up for us, so natural, like no shame for any of us that like have such a strong resistance over this, what's happening, that you want to lash out. Yeah, and that can be a tough one to come back from, and that can take some practice. Breathing, loving yourself, like the classic skills that you and I know so well, Paul. But know thyself. Ask for what you want.
Yeah, I want.
And if the other person doesn't want to give it to you, don't make them wrong. Like, what a beautiful thing for someone to say, "Oh, you want that? I actually can't give that to you." I mean, that is. Okay, well, maybe I need to get that from somebody else. Maybe we shouldn't be in a relationship, but at least you're getting clear, instead of this ambiguous thing. And I think that's a lot of the keys of what you talk about, Scott, in your work.
Well,
I imagine, but I've never actually sat with you in your deep work, but I can only imagine that there's something in there.
Yeah, and I like it. You call me Scott from time to time.
Sorry.
Scott and I, we get along really well. I'm kind of like, if you look at it, I'm a bit of the head guy. I analyze it. I have the charts, all the rest of it. Scott is the empathy or the heart guy, and it's a good combination. The thing that I think I want to bring up here before we go too much further is that if you climbing Mount Everest, if you're a mountain climber, and I've watched mountain climbers. I'm not a mountain climber. No, it looks like way too much work for me. But one of the things I've realized is that most mountain climbing failures in expedition happen before they ever get on the mountain, because they didn't have the right tools or team, and something that, ended up sabotaging their trip. And part of what you're talking about, Adrian, and we've been talking about during this whole call, is that there are tools and techniques and skills and muscles to build. Like, there's the normal way of reactivity, and then there's resourcefulness. But it's like, if you look at someone who's got a beautiful relationship, you go, "Oh, aren't they lucky?" And it's like, most likely, no. Most likely, they work their ass off. You don't see it, but it's like you watch a concert pianist, and I was listening to one pianist talk, and they said, somebody came up to me after playing and they said, "Oh, I love the way you play. I wish I could play like you do." And the pianist, "No, you don't." I go, no, I really do. And he goes, "No, you don't." He goes, "Yeah, yes, I do. How can you tell me?" "Yes, I do." He says, "Okay, well, show up for practice for 5 hours a day, 7 days a week."
Since you were 7.
Like me? And it's like, no, I want the outcome, but I don't want to put in the work. There's a huge difference between want to and want to. See, someone who wants to be in shape, like you said, whether it's golf or working out or whatever it is, if you want to be in shape, mountain biking is my sort of obsession. I do that almost every day. That's how I stay in shape. But there's a lot of people who want to be in shape. They want to have a better relationship. And they are sitting on the couch watching TV, eating bonbons and drinking beer going, I wish I was in shape. Well, like if you want to have a remarkable relationship, even with yourself, like your whole 10 days of in the silent retreat was about a relationship with yourself. Like what we invest our time and our money into is what shows up as most valuable to us. So you put 10 days of quiet time into yourself. Most people never spend 10 days and invest that in themselves. When I was learning nonviolent communication, I studied with a guy named Marshall Rosenberg, the creator of it, and I spent almost a month in Sweden. And it was about $5,000 or $6,000 by the time I travel from, at that point I was in Canada, and the hotels and the airlines and the cost and everything, and almost a month of my time. And it was a turning point in my life. It was one of the best months I ever did. But like, are people willing to invest in their relationship with themselves, in their relationship with somebody else? Do they really want to have the skills? And if you want to have the skills, get yourself a mentor, a coach, someone like me, someone like Adrian, someone like Scott, and start to study it. Take the journey to mastery. I was just before I got on this call, I was thinking about there's a huge difference between trailblazing or following a trail. And if you want to make a lot of progress quickly, follow a trail.
Mm-hmm.
If you just want the adventure, blaze a trail. But what's transformed my relationship so magnificently has been following a trail versus blazing it. And then I can do whatever I want with the tools, but somebody, learning nonviolent communication, learning to have a relationship with my needs. Because we're in a culture, and I want to hear the last thing, I guess, from you, Adrian, is your relationship with your needs. Because we're in a culture that has needs shame. So there's 3 levels: needs shame, needs embarrassment, needs embrace. And needs shame is like, I'm broken that I have needs. And I definitely started there. Like, I'm embarrassed. I'm actually ashamed. There's something wrong with me for having needs. And then embarrassed is, I want you to meet my needs, but I don't want to have to ask you. And if you don't meet my needs without me asking, you don't love me. And then the third one is like, I'm embracing. I have precious needs. And I want to share that with you and make some clear requests. So where are you in this journey with your needs as a man?
Yeah, well, fortunately, pretty good. I feel blessed that I was told from a pretty early age that I am inherently good, worthy, and deserving. And and that's definitely stuck with me. And so many of us don't get that, And even if we get that from our parents, when we were in middle school, we were like shamed and ridiculed. And like, how many people are in therapy because of their time at middle school? Grateful that didn't happen for me as well. It's so I feel like I'm in a pretty solid place of honoring the needs that I'm really clear on. And I can certainly do better. I mean, this is a deep question, and I feel like I would want to sit and ponder it a little bit more. There are, and I feel like there's certainly room for me to, I think part of it is actually to know myself more, to get clear on what is actually going to serve me more. I think when the need is clear, like I really need space, or I really want to do this fun thing, or I'm really from like my partner. Hey, I'm really like, you're really coming from a like negative place. What's going on? I'm wanting this to change, or I'll at least understand, or maybe I'm wanting to be somewhere else. Like I feel capable of really capable of doing that. Yeah, so I definitely don't sit much in the shame. I think for me, it's going deeper and getting clear on like what is it that I actually want, and bringing it to the surface, like unearthing like what is going to serve me more in my life. Yeah. I think that's some work that a lot of people don't even really know what it is that they need. So sitting down and investigating that, I think, can be well served by all of us, or serve all of us very well.
Yeah. So thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Skylar, who's, I'm guessing, ran out of electricity there, or battery. And if you're curious, you've been watching this call and you want to know, there are 7 core needs. Now, there's plenty, not core needs, there's 7 core skills. There's 7 core problems that most relationships have, and there's 7 core skills. And I created a quick, and I put the link up there, a survey where you can find out. There's 2 different addresses for it. That's the simpler one to go to, arguelesslovemore.net/ask, and fill out and find out what's your strength, what's your kryptonite when it comes to relationships. And it's a great exploration. And it's, once you start to understand the 7 skills, you start to see it becomes visible. Oh, needs is one of them. Communication's another. Healing wounds, conflict resolution. There's an amazing set of skills that if you have these skills, it will help transform your relationship. Now, I want to be clear. I brought up the analogy earlier about climbing Mount Everest. Even with all of the best training in the world, climbing Mount Everest is still a dangerous, challenging thing. And even with all of the greatest skills in the world, relationships can be dangerous, and not dangerous, but challenging and heartbreaking at times, and maybe dangerous. So it's about building your relationship muscles and developing your skills and going in and taking it on and learning it, deciding like you're going to master it the same way you would master golf or piano or becoming a doctor or a lawyer or some other really important thing in your life. Set yourself up to win. Give yourself the tools, the training, the coaching to succeed. And if that sounds interesting to you, you can get a hold of me at arguelesslovemore.net, or, Scott has a whole group of people that he's trained at Love Coach Academy. Adrian's one of these people that have been trained. And find a coach that resonates with you, that will help you get from where you are to where you want to go. And take some of the courses. Heidi Love and I are going to be teaching a course called the Couples Course coming up in, I think it's June 29th or 27th. I'm not sure. Towards the end of June. Definitely check it out. Set yourself up to win. Get the tools you need. So, Adrian, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Your wisdom.
Really enjoyed it, Paul.
All right. And once again, people, Paul Sterling here, my book, Argue Less, Love More. And at 6 o'clock at night, West Coast time, we do these calls, or 9 o'clock in the morning. If you want to find out more about them, lovecoachacademy.com. Have a great day. Let us know what you got out of it. Type us a message there. Have a great day. We will see you.